let's talk pre-excitation syndromes. And pre-excitation is just what happens when the ventricles depolarize a little bit too early. They shouldn't be depolarizing kind of quite that early, but just a little bit too early. And this is because of these accessory pathways that bypass or mostly bypass the AV node, so there's no slowdown in that electrical conductivity in the AV node. This may lead to some tachycardia, some re-entry tachycardias, but pre-excitation syndromes don't mean that it's a tachycardic rhythm. You can live every day of your life, heart rate of 70, and have a pre-excitation syndrome. So we're going to talk about what these pre-excitation syndromes are, go through a few of them, and then discuss why it's a pre-excitation syndrome that might lead to a tachycardia. Leading into our pre-excitation syndromes, we have to talk about AVNRT. AVNRT is AV nodal reentry tachycardia. This is our common SVT, what we just commonly call SVT. But if we're going to be technical about it, SVT is supraventricular tachycardia. It is a tachycardia where the focus comes from above the ventricles. So even a sinus tachycardia, bumping along at 110 beats per minute, is an SVT. An atrial fibrillation at 103 beats per minute is an SVT. So what we typically just call SVT, typically just document as SVT, is most commonly AVNRT, and it's just nodal re-entry. Kind of this electrical impulse gets kind of caught and wound around. The AV node goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, shoots both ways, and just kind of stimulates everything all at once and creates this tachycardia. Can be triggered by PACs, can be triggered by PVCs, can just be kind of triggered by all these different causes. You might see most commonly buried P waves, so we can't really see the P waves because the QRS complexes are just so close to each other. The tachycardia is so fast, or the P wave might be after the QRS, might be a retrograde. An example of this here, AVNRT, typically just documented as SVT, but a narrow complex tachycardia, just going along at 190, 200, 210, 220 beats per minute. And we've got little P waves here. I see little tiny P waves just in front of the QRS complex, but P waves kind of hard to see. But we've got this narrow complex, very fast tachycardia, and just a classic example of AVNRT. But AVNRT need not always be narrow complex. It depends on which kind of accessory path, what kind of like pathway this thing is taking around our little AV node and our roundabout, our internodal pathways. So, if it goes around in an orthodromic fashion here on the left, we're going in a clockwise fashion. That's going to create this narrow complex, narrow QRS complex tachycardia. On the other hand, if we go antidromic, over here we're going in a counterclockwise fashion through the internodal pathways back through the AV node. We're going to create a wide complex tachycardia. Still AVNRT, still our kind of classic SVT, just narrow complex versus wide complex. And it's narrow complex over here because we're going in a somewhat normal fashion. The electricity is conducting in a somewhat normal fashion and then coming back around and being um, reconducted. But here on the right, this antidromic conduction, we're going down into like a portion of the ventricles before we go back around to the normal conduction pathway. So we're kind of taking an aberrant pathway there in the antidromic side of things. Antidromic AVNRT, antidromic SVTs look very different than our just kind of classic textbook little SVT. Throw them on the monitor. They're going away at like 200 beats per minute. Narrow complex, right? But our complexes are they're still regular. Our RRs are still regular. We still have P waves right there. We can see little tiny P waves right in there. Those are still regular. The only like real difference here between the two is this wide complex. So when you see this, don't automatically think VTAC. We'll talk about VTAC and SVT, aberrant SVT later on, but you know, look at this, and we see it's a tachycardia. It's a wide complex tachycardia, but is it ventricular in nature, or is it is it an SVT? Is it an AVNRT type of tachycardia? And here, that's just another example of an SVT and an AVNRT. The only difference is it's antidromic and it's a wide complex QRS.